Not going to lie, a little jealous of what's happening there in Baton Rouge. Has LSU figured it all out? They got a great game coming up this weekend. Number 6 Alabama is visiting them. To get an insider's point of view, let's go to the hotline right now. Matt Moscona from ESPN Baton Rouge. After further review, joining us. What's going on, Matt? How you doing, sir?
David, I'm doing well, man. When LSU Bama means something, it's way more fun.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking that A&M season would mean something. We'll see if it means something for them at the end of the year against LSU. But let's get it done. When you think about this LSU team, like we saw some of the issues for week 1, a very winnable game, obviously, and then the Tennessee game. Everybody's struggling with Tennessee. But did you see this kind of success this early from Brian Kelly?
So at this point, I did actually. I had him 6-2 at this point. The thing I had flipped was I had them beating Florida State and losing to Florida. Dave, there's talent on this team. There's not championship level talent. I don't think there's enough talent to beat Alabama. I mean, there could always be a one-off and you could play out of your mind and Bama could turn it over a ton and they could win the game. Certainly that's possible. But LSU's not at that level yet. But there's talent, and Brian Kelly has instilled a level of discipline and structure around an organization that lacked it completely under Ed Ogeron, as we saw. So yeah, I mean, I did expect them to be better than many thought. I think when you and I spoke in media days, I told you I thought their ceiling this year was 9, and it looks like that may be their ceiling if they lose to Bama and manage to win the other 3. That's where they'd land. But I also felt their floor this year was 7. So I didn't think maybe the floor was as low as some thought, but I also didn't think the ceiling was as high as maybe LSU fans had hoped. So they're actually kind of where I thought they'd be. They got outclassed by a really good Tennessee team. They got a really tough test this weekend with Bama.
So let's think about this for a minute, though. If LSU wins this weekend, they're in the freaking driver's seat for the SEC West. Like, I mean, well, they're still
crazy.
To me, it's just amazing that that's the conversation right now.
That is surprising. And keep in mind, I told you that the Florida State games had flipped because I would have had them at 2 conference losses already right now. I thought, they would be good to split the month of October, and they went 3-1. Really impressive to win at Auburn and at Florida. I know both teams are struggling, but David, LSU in their history before this year had never beaten Florida and Auburn on the road in the same year, ever. So what they've been able to do, in taking those 2 games, beating Ole Miss the way they did, the fact that your only loss right now in conference is Tennessee, which there's no shame in that right now, is really impressive. And you're right. I mean, if they win, they're in the driver's seat to win the West, which I certainly didn't think. And circumstances have to happen, like Bama losing to Tennessee for the first time in 15 years. But that's the reality, man. Look, Nick's first SEC championship at LSU in 2001, David, they were 5-3 in the league. They won a tiebreaker in a weird one-off year in the West, and coincidentally beat a Tennessee team that was ranked number 2 in the country that year. So weird things happen, but they got a big test this weekend.
So I'm trying to understand LSU. Look, I see the record. I see what they've done. But also, we're not that far removed from the offense being an issue as well. So what have they done to fix some of those offensive issues?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And some of it's personnel and some of it's scheme, and they kind of go hand in hand. One thing that's massive is Charles Turner's emergence at center. That's not a very flashy answer that people are going to be excited about. But I'll put you this way. First drive of the season against Florida State. First down, Jaden Daniels scrambles for 25 yards, gets hit late out of bounds, an extra 15. They throw first down into the end zone to Kayshon Boutte, contested ball. He doesn't come down with it. LSU ends up with a goal-to-go situation down around the 1. They snap the ball over Jaden Daniels' head. They lose 15 yards and end up settling for a field goal. Well, that was when they had a revolving door at center. If Charles Turner is the starting center that day, maybe LSU scores in their opening possession against Florida State, and that game's completely different. Maybe not. But he has stabilized that unit. That's one part of it. And then the offensive line stabilizing, David, the other thing that's allowed Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, to do is get more comfortable in his play call. And they are just a more successful running team. Early in the year, LSU's only rushing offense was Jaden Daniels on busted plays. I mean, he was LSU's leading rusher early just on scramble drill. Now they've actually established a running game with zone read, with design quarterback runs, working in the running backs. Because their running game has become efficient, it's opened up a lot in the passing game as well. So it's just been a process, I think, of the offensive coordinator learning his personnel and them getting comfortable with their calling, and that's why you've seen that improvement.
Matt, so we knew it would be different with Brian. And then in the beginning, there was a little hiccups, the whole accent and whatnot. But what have you learned throughout a season? Because you see things in spring ball, you see things in fall camp. But what have you learned during the season about what makes BK so good?
It's his attention to detail. He is the most detail-oriented coach that I've seen here since Nick. And there's a reason he's been as successful as he has for a head coach for 32 years or whatever it's been. But you're right. Brian, when he got hired, I think we all had our preconceptions about him. And my perception was always just what we've seen, right? The sort of red-faced screaming guy on the sideline. And I thought Northeastern guy, cold, standoffish. He's actually been the opposite, man. He's been warm and engaging, and he tries to crack jokes in press conferences. Every press conference, they're not very funny, but he tries. I think that's probably been the biggest surprise to me. But the reason for his success is just obvious. He has a plan. He has structure. There's no detail that goes unchecked, and that sounds cliche, but everything from sleep patterns to exactly what you eat and when you eat it, travel and how long guys are in the hotel room on road games or it's just, it all matters. I mean, David, last year when LSU opened up against UCLA, some of the star players on the team were riding scooters around Santa Monica like 3 hours before kickoff. I mean, it was kind of a free-for-all with that, and it showed on the field. Kelly is a 180 from that.
So I'm looking at the schedule the rest of the way, and we know life in the SEC. 1 week it feels real good. You got a couple wins. You have a chance for the SEC West. But the reality is very winnable games and very losable games, such as life in the SEC. Alabama, Arkansas, even on the road at A&M, and they're their own story, but maybe they figured out their quarterback situation. When you look at that and what's ahead and how you guys feel about what's going on right now, there is a little bit of a drop-off potential too.
I don't think there's any question. It's hard to win on the road in the league. Georgia should have got at Missouri. I mean, look at A&M this year going to Alabama. I mean, you got to play on the final play of the game to win that game in Tuscaloosa with all the struggles. It is hard. It's just hard, man. It's hard to win in this league. So if you go take anybody for granted, you can get popped. KJ Jefferson presents problems at Arkansas. That's going to be an 11 a.m. kickoff. And the game in College Station, if Connor Wegman, if Jimbo's found his guy, that adds a different element to that offense, obviously. And it's obviously been a disappointing season there for the Aggies. But man, that I would imagine that would be a nice punctuation mark to beat LSU in the final weekend. So, man, what I'll tell you, Dave, is like LSU is just not good enough to take anybody for granted. Like they're playing well, they're playing hard, they have strengths, they have talent, they're well coached, but they're not so good that LSU can do what Georgia did against Missouri and think they're going to win. So that's the challenge, is to stay focused over this final month, because it would be. I mean, I think you said it perfectly. Even if LSU loses to Bama and manages to beat Arkansas, UAB, and Texas A&M, you go 9-3, and there's a good chance you're in the New Year Six. I mean, if year one under Brian Kelly, they're playing in the Orange Bowl with a chance to get 10 wins, my goodness, that would be an incredible success, an unmitigated success for this team year one.
No doubt about that. So how do they limit Bryce Young this weekend, who is, I mean, even when he loses, he puts up, which is very rare, he puts up amazing numbers.
Yeah. I think the key is your athletic linebackers. And if there is one thing defensively where LSU may match up well with Bama, it's there. LSU is really athletic in the defensive front seven. And I think they could maybe do what Texas was able to do to Bryce Young, which is not let him beat you with his feet, although he's going to move in the pocket. He's going to improvise and make plays, but really make those receivers beat you. And if there is a shortcoming on this Bama team this year, it's that their receivers don't look like they have in the past. I think we'd all agree on that. There's no Jamison Williams. There's no Amari Cooper. There's no Devontae Smith on this team. There's no Ruggs and Waddle and Judy. So, but the flip side of that, David, which is the unfortunate part for LSU, is LSU's unquestioned weakness is their cornerback position. So if LSU can't pressure Bryce Young and he has time to throw, even though Bama's receivers aren't all Americans this year, they're still better than LSU's corners, and that's a problem. So And for LSU, I think you realize you're going to give up points, you're going to give up yards, and you're going to have to find a way to score with this team and see if they can do it.
Matt Moscona, we appreciate it, sir. Let's talk soon, and hopefully I'll see you here in a couple of weeks.
My pleasure. I look forward to it.